When your mom calls you her steady girl at Christmas dinner, you believe her, right? Even if your brother's name is already on a box upstairs.
Christmas dinner felt normal that night, which is probably why I let myself relax. The house smelled like cinnamon, roasted turkey, and the pine candle my mom only lit when company came over. My brother Caleb was laughing too loudly in the dining room. My aunt was fixing the crooked angel on the tree, and Mom kept moving between the kitchen and the table like everything was exactly where it belonged. For once, I wanted to believe it was. I was 23, tired and proud of myself in a way I had not told anyone yet. After years of carrying bills, repairs, late notices, and family emergencies, I had finally done something for me. But that night, I just poured wine, passed plates, and let my mom call me her steady girl like it still meant love. Then I noticed a cardboard box outside my old bedroom door, with Caleb's name written on it. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. For a second, I just stood there with the serving spoon in my hand, staring at that box like it had been placed in the wrong house. Caleb's name was written in my mom's handwriting, big black marker, the kind she used when she wanted everyone to know where something belonged. I told myself it was probably old decorations, or maybe something he left behind from the last time he stayed for just 2 weeks and turned it into 4 months. That was Caleb. He drifted in and out of our lives like the rules were softer for him. Mom came up behind me and touched my elbow. "Mara, honey, don't let the potatoes get cold." Her voice was gentle enough to make me feel ridiculous for noticing the box at all. So I smiled, carried the bowl into the dining room, and tried to step back into the version of the night I wanted. The one with candlelight, clinking glasses, and everyone pretending we had not spent years leaning on me whenever something broke. At the table, Uncle Ray was telling Caleb he looked good, like unemployment was a phase that made him more interesting. Aunt Linda asked my mom if she needed help, but Mom waved her off and looked at me instead. "Mara knows where everything is," she said. Everyone laughed lightly, and I did too, because it was true. I knew which cabinet held the serving trays. I knew the breaker that tripped when the oven and microwave ran together. I knew which window leaked during heavy rain, which bill had to be paid before the late fee hit, and which smile my mom used when she wanted something without asking directly. Still, when she sat beside me and squeezed my hand under the table, I let myself soften. "You've always been my steady girl," she whispered. For one small moment, I wanted that to be enough. I wanted to believe she saw the years behind those words, the missed nights out, the extra shifts, the way I had grown up faster because someone had to. I looked at the tree glowing in the corner, at the ornaments I made in elementary school, at the family photos still lined across the mantel, and I told myself this house had hurt me and held me at the same time. Then Caleb lifted his glass and grinned at Mom like they were sharing a private joke. She smiled back too quickly. Aunt Linda noticed and asked, "Is this about the house thing?" My fork paused halfway to my plate. Mom's hand slipped away from mine. Mom looked at Aunt Linda so fast it was almost sharp. "Not during dinner," she said, but she kept smiling like nothing had happened. Caleb leaned back in his chair, still holding his glass, pretending to study the candles in the center of the table. He had that look he got when he already knew the answer to something and wanted everyone else to catch up slowly. It made my stomach tighten, but I swallowed it down with a sip of wine. "What house thing?" I asked. Mom reached for the gravy boat. "Nothing serious. Eat before everything gets cold." That should have been the end of it. In my family, when Mom said something was nothing, everyone knew to move around it. Uncle Ray changed the subject to football. Aunt Linda started complimenting the turkey. Caleb made a joke about how he was only there for the food and not the family drama. Everyone laughed. I did not, because the house thing was not small, not to me. This house had been the thing I answered calls about at work. It was the reason I learned how escrow worked before I learned how to take a real vacation. It was late mortgage notices hidden under grocery coupons. It was Mom crying at the kitchen sink after Dad died, saying she could not lose the only place that still felt like him. It was me, at 20, signing papers I barely understood because she promised it was temporary and family helped family. So I waited for her to look at me, to include me, to say whatever was coming with my name in it, not around me. Instead, she turned to Caleb. "Your brother has had such a hard year," she said softly. Caleb looked down, humble on command. Mom's voice warmed as she continued. "And I think it's time this family made room for him. The table went quiet in a way that did not feel peaceful anymore. Then Caleb glanced toward the hallway, toward the box outside my old bedroom, and I realized everyone seemed less surprised than I was.
They are talking about making room for Caleb. Like Mara isn't sitting there. How is she the last to know?
For a few seconds, all I could hear was the tiny crackle of the candles between us. Made room for him, I repeated, keeping my voice calm because everyone was watching my face now. Mom folded her napkin in her lap, smoothing the edges like she had practiced this. Mara, don't make it sound strange. You know Caleb needs stability. Caleb gave a small shrug, like he hated being the center of attention, even though he had been waiting for it all night. It's just been hard finding something that makes sense right now, he said. Rent is insane. Aunt Linda nodded. Uncle Ray looked down at his plate. Nobody looked shocked. Nobody asked what I needed. Mom leaned forward, her voice softening in that careful way she used when she wanted control to sound like kindness. After New Year's, Caleb is going to stay here permanently. I stared at her. The words landed slowly at first, then all at once. Permanently, here. In the house I had kept from being taken by the bank. In the house, where I had slept beside my laptop at the kitchen table, checking payment confirmations at 2 in the morning. In the house where my name was on the documents, nobody at that table had ever cared to read. Mom kept talking and every sentence made the room feel smaller. You've done so much already, she said, smiling like she was praising me. And you're young. You're independent. You can adjust easier than he can. My hand tightened around the stem of my wine glass. Adjust how? I asked. The smile flickered. Well, she said, you have friends. You mentioned wanting a change. Maybe an apartment closer to work. Something small. Just until you figure things out. Caleb cleared his throat. It's not like you need all this space, Mara. That was the first time I felt something inside me go quiet. Not angry, not loud, just quiet. Because he said it like space was only something he deserved. Like the years I had spent making sure the pipes worked and the taxes were paid did not count as living. Like I had been a placeholder in my own life until he needed somewhere to land. I looked around the table. Aunt Linda's expression was tense but accepting. Uncle Ray rubbed his jaw, uncomfortable but silent. My cousin Emily stared at her plate. They all knew enough to be uneasy, but not enough to stop it. Or maybe they knew exactly enough. Did you tell them I agreed to this? I asked Mom. Her face changed so slightly most people would have missed it. I did not. Mara, she warned. Aunt Linda blinked. Denise said you thought it was best. That you wanted Caleb to have a fresh start. My chest tightened, but my voice stayed level. She said I offered? Caleb shifted in his chair. Why are you making it sound like some conspiracy? It's family. There it was. The word they used when they wanted my labor quiet. Family. The word that turned bills into favors, exhaustion into duty, and my life into something everyone else could vote on. Mom set her napkin down. I didn't want this to become a debate. Of course you didn't, I said. The room went still. Mom's eyes sharpened. Watch your tone. I looked at her, then really looked at her. At the woman who had squeezed my hand 10 minutes earlier and called me steady. At the woman who had let me believe steadiness was love, when maybe it had only ever meant useful. You announced this at Christmas dinner, I said, in front of everyone. I announced it because I thought people would be happy for your brother. And where did you think I was going to go? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. That silence answered more than anything she could have said. Caleb scoffed. You always figure things out. I turned to him. That's not the same as having somewhere to go. Mom exhaled hard, her patience thinning. Mara, don't be dramatic. You've had time to plan your little condo idea. It's not an idea, I said. She waved that away like the detail annoyed her. Whatever it is, this is your brother's chance. You can't resent him for needing help. I almost laughed, but it would have come out wrong, because needing help was one thing. Building a future out of my displacement was another. I set my wine glass down carefully, making sure it did not shake against the table. The sound was small, but everyone heard it. Mom, I said.
Whose name do you think is legally on this house?
Her lips parted. Caleb's eyebrows pulled together. Uncle Ray finally looked up. The candles burned low between us, and for the first time all night, my mother looked less like she was hosting dinner and more like she had lost control of the room. Then I said, that's awkward because I signed the final papers yesterday. For 1 second, nobody moved. Not Caleb, not Aunt Linda, not Uncle Ray, not even Mom. The words just sat there in the middle of the table, heavier than the food, heavier than the candles, heavier than every lie that had been dressed up as family tradition. Then Mom laughed. It was not a real laugh. It was too quick, too thin, too practiced. The kind of laugh people use when they are trying to drag reality back into place before anyone else notices it slipped. "Don't be ridiculous," she said. Caleb looked between us. "What papers?" I kept my hands folded in my lap because if I touched the wine glass again, I was afraid everyone would see how badly my fingers wanted to shake. "The closing papers," I said. Mom's smile disappeared. Aunt Linda sat back in her chair. Uncle Ray muttered, "Closing?" "The house sold yesterday," I said. "The final documents were signed, the funds were transferred, and the new owners take possession after the agreed move-out period." Caleb blinked like I had started speaking another language. "New owners?" His voice cracked on the words. For the first time that night, he looked less like the chosen son and more like someone who had been promised something he never checked. Mom pushed her chair back just an inch. The scrape against the floor made everyone flinch. "You had no right," she said. I looked at her, waiting for the guilt to hit me the way it always did. Usually, it came fast. One sharp look from her, one disappointed breath, and I would start explaining myself before I even knew what I had done wrong. This time, there was only pressure in my chest. Heavy, yes. Painful, yes, but clear. "I had every legal right," I said. Uncle Ray frowned. "Mara, how could you sell Denise's house?" There it was again, Denise's house. Not the bank's house when the foreclosure letters came. Not my problem when the insurance lapsed. Not Caleb's responsibility when the water heater burst and flooded the laundry room. But Denise's house, now that someone else wanted to benefit from it. Mom pointed at me across the table. "Do not sit there and twist this. That house was your father's home." My throat tightened at the mention of Dad, because she knew exactly where to press. She knew that name could still pull me backward. Back to hospital bills, funeral flowers, Mom crying into dish towels, and me promising I would not let everything fall apart. "I know whose home it was," I said quietly. "I'm the one who fought to keep it." Caleb let out a bitter laugh. "By selling it?" "No," I said, turning to him. "By paying for it." His face hardened. Aunt Linda looked confused now, and that confused look hurt almost more than the anger. "Paying for what?" I glanced at Mom. She was staring at me like a warning. Like I was still supposed to protect her version of the story, even while she was trying to throw me out of it. "The arrears," I said. "The mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance, the roof repair, the water heater. The electrical work after the breaker kept sparking. All of it." Nobody spoke. The silence did not feel empty. It felt crowded. Aunt Linda slowly turned to my mother. "Denise?" Mom's jaw tightened. "She helped. Families help." "That's not helping," I said. "Helping is bringing dinner when someone is sick. Helping is covering a bill once. I took over the debt because you said the bank was going to take the house." Mom's eyes flashed. "And I was grieving." "I know," I said. "That's why I said yes." For a moment, the anger in her face shifted into something smaller. Not regret. Not exactly. More like being seen in a way she did not want. Then Caleb ruined it. "So what? You just cashed out and left everyone screwed?" I turned back to him, and the old pattern tried to rise again. "Explain. Soften. Make him less uncomfortable. Make Mom less angry. Keep Christmas intact." But Christmas was already broken. It had been broken the second they boxed up my room before asking whether I had anywhere to sleep. "You were moving into my room," I said. Caleb looked toward the hallway, then back at me. "Mom said you were leaving anyway. And that made it yours?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Uncle Ray rubbed a hand over his face. "Wait. Denise, did you sign the house over to Mara?" Mom's chair scraped again, louder this time. "That was paperwork. It was never meant to be this." "This?" I asked. "You mean mine?" Her eyes filled, but her voice stayed hard. "It was meant to stay in the family." "It did," I said. "Until the family decided I was removable." Aunt Linda's face went pale. That was when I understood she had known something, but not everything. Maybe she had known Caleb was moving in. Maybe she had known Mom planned to pressure me. But she had not known the house was legally mine. She had not known I was the one keeping it standing, while everyone else called me lucky for having a place to stay. "Mara," Aunt Linda said softly, "your mother told us you wanted to give Caleb a fresh start." I looked at her. "Did she also tell you I was being asked to move out of a house I owned?" Aunt Linda looked away. That was answer enough. Mom stood suddenly, her napkin falling to the floor. "I will not be humiliated in my own dining room." I almost said it was not her dining room anymore. I did not. Because the truth was already doing enough damage without me sharpening it. Caleb stood too, the panic finally catching up with his anger. So where am I supposed to live now? The room went painfully quiet. I looked at my brother, then at the cardboard box visible in the hallway, then at my mother, whose face was red with fury and fear. And all I could think was how nobody had asked me that question. Not once. Caleb kept staring at me like I had personally knocked down a door he had already pictured himself walking through. Mom stood beside him, one hand gripping the back of her chair, her breathing shallow and angry. The candles were still burning. The turkey was still cooling. The tree was still glowing in the corner like this was any other Christmas night, but nothing at that table felt like family anymore. You can't just do this, Mom said. I already did, her face twisted. After everything I've been through, that almost broke me. Not because it was fair, but because I had heard that sentence in 100 different forms since Dad died. After everything I've been through. As if her grief had swallowed mine whole. As if losing my father at 20 meant I became old enough to carry her, but never hurt enough to be carried. I pushed my chair back and stood slowly. When Dad died, I said, "You were 3 months behind on the mortgage, then 5. Then the bank letters started coming. You told me you couldn't sleep. You told me losing this house would be like losing him all over again." Mom's eyes darted toward Aunt Linda and Uncle Ray, but I kept going. I took extra shifts. I drained my savings. I signed paperwork because you said it was temporary. Then temporary became 3 years. I paid the arrears. I paid the taxes. I paid the insurance. I fixed the roof when water came through the ceiling. I replaced the water heater when Caleb said he'd help, and then stopped answering his phone. Caleb's face flushed. That's not fair. No, I said, looking at him, it wasn't. That landed harder than I expected. Maybe because I did not raise my voice. Maybe because I did not sound like I was asking anyone to agree with me. I was just done begging reality to be recognized. Uncle Ray leaned forward, his expression heavy. Denise, is that true? Mom pressed her lips together. Aunt Linda whispered, you told us Mara was staying there rent-free. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. Rent-free? The words burned on the way out. I was paying for a house everyone still treated like it belonged to Mom. I was responsible when something broke, invisible when something worked, and disposable the second Caleb wanted it. Mom's eyes filled again, but this time I did not move toward her. I did not reach for a napkin. I did not try to make her feelings easier to hold. She looked smaller than she had at the beginning of dinner. Not helpless, just exposed. You should have talked to me before selling it, she said. I tried, I said. For months. Her gaze dropped. You said you didn't want to discuss stressful things. You said I was being negative. You said I was young and didn't understand what home meant. I looked around the room, at the people who had nodded along when she announced my life like it was a seating arrangement. So I handled it the way I handled everything else. Quietly, legally, alone. Aunt Linda covered her mouth. Uncle Ray pushed his plate away. My cousin Emily looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Caleb shook his head, his anger turning desperate. So that's it? You get money and I get nothing? You get exactly what you put into it, I said. He stared at me. Mom snapped, Mara, but the warning in her voice did not work anymore. It reached me and fell flat. For years, that tone had made me feel like a bad daughter. That night, it only sounded like someone losing a tool they had used too often. The new owners take possession after the move-out period, I said. Everything is in the paperwork. I already arranged movers for my things. The rest is not my responsibility. Mom's face hardened again. You're abandoning us. That word hit the deepest. Abandoning. I thought of the box outside my old bedroom. Caleb's name in black marker. My mother's hand squeezing mine while she planned to send me out into the cold after New Year's. The relatives who had come ready to smile through it because they believed I had agreed to disappear. No, I said quietly. You abandoned me at this table. I'm just finally leaving with my name still attached to my own life. Nobody answered. For the first time that night, silence was not being used against me. It belonged to me. Aunt Linda stood after a moment, her chair legs scraping softly. Mara, I'm sorry, she said. I didn't know all of that. I nodded, but I did not comfort her. I did not tell her it was okay. It was not okay just because someone finally understood too late. Uncle Ray looked at Mom. Denise, you and Caleb can stay with me for a few days while you figure out the move. Caleb's head snapped toward him. A few days, Uncle Ray's voice stayed firm. That's what I said. Mom looked like she had been slapped, but no one rushed to rescue her from the consequences. That was new. That was almost stranger than the betrayal itself. I walked to the hallway and picked up my coat from the hook beside the door. The box with Caleb's name was still there, blocking part of the path to my old room. I looked at it for a second, then stepped around it. Mom followed me with her voice. Mara, don't leave like this. I turned back. The dining room was behind her, all gold light and ruined expectations. For years, I had believed that if I gave enough, stayed calm enough, forgave fast enough, one day she would look at me and see a daughter instead of a solution. But that kind of seeing could not be earned from someone determined not to look. I'm not leaving like this, I said. You chose this. I'm just done standing where you put me. Then I took my dessert dish from the kitchen counter, because even that small thing felt like proof I was allowed to take back what was mine, and I walked out. The cold air hit my face so hard I almost cried before I reached the car. Almost. Instead, I sat behind the wheel with my hands on the steering wheel, breathing through the ache in my chest. It hurt. Of course it hurt. No amount of paperwork made it painless to realize your family had planned your removal over Christmas dinner. But beneath the hurt was something steadier, relief. By New Year's, I was in my own place. It was smaller than the house, quieter too. There were boxes stacked against the wall, a mattress on the floor, and one strand of Christmas lights taped crookedly around the window because I had not had time to decorate properly. Still, when I locked the door that night, nobody else had a key. Nobody could promise my room away. Nobody could call my sacrifice love while planning my eviction. Nobody could turn my stability into their safety net and then ask why I was tired. The house sold. Caleb found out that starting over was harder when nobody handed him a deed. Mom had to pack the memories she thought gave her power over me. And the family finally had to sit with the truth they had avoided, because it was easier to believe I would always adjust. I lost the version of home I kept trying to protect. But for the first time in my life, I had one that did not require me to disappear.
It's strange how family can call you dependable until depending on you means respecting your place too. When trust becomes expectation instead of care, where does love actually fit?